Hi there, I'm Beth, and today I'll be sewing my Mori skirt pattern for Smart Doll. This is my prototype skirt, modelled on my prototype dress form. I've been busy lately. This skirt is made in natural cotton with chain, button, lace and fabric embellishments. It's hard to see here, but I also dip bleached the lower half for an ombre effect. The pattern for this version of my skirt will also be available, but I wanted to create a longer version too. That's the skirt I'll be making for you today. The inspiration for these patterns came from my interest in the Japanese Mori and Strega fashion styles. These are the pieces you will need to print for skirt 1, my prototype. It's a shorter length and has a long point aligned to the centre front. These are the pieces for skirt 2. It's longer and has the short seam aligned to the front centre. I've cut out my skirt panels, back pieces and waistband already. This time using a kind of crinkly muslin style fabric and plain cotton for the waistband. The slight fraying doesn't bother me, but you can overlock or zigzag your edges or treat them with fray check. It's not strictly necessary, but I have ironed a medium weight interfacing to one of my waistband pieces. I've marked on the pattern where to start and finish sewing, and it includes the 5mm seam allowance. We're going to turn it through the space and iron it well. Here it's sewn and I've snipped off the corners and cut slits into the seam allowance where the curves are, to help it lay flat once turned through. You'll notice I've got my turning space in a different spot here. I decided later that having it on the bottom was better, so ignore that. Here it is turned right side out and I've poked out all the corners before ironing flat. I made sure my seam allowance is all poked inside. We'll put this aside for later. I've made a note in the pattern that the main skirt panel is larger than the paper, so it's shown as a half that can be cut on a fold, or you can print two and stick the halves together. Either way, you'll choose whether to align your pattern pieces to the grain or to the bias. Choose one and stick to it. Here I've got the centre line on the grain. I put aside my two mirrored back pieces and will focus on joining the main panels first. I lay them right sides facing and sew from the waist to the hem with a 5mm seam allowance. Then I take another panel and repeat. And another, so I have all four joined. Now grab the back pieces and place right sides facing like this. And sew the seam. So when opened out, the straight edge is free at the back. Repeat for the other side, like this. It's all quite large, so here's a different shot of all the main pieces sewn together. Here I've flipped it so the seams face up, and I'm taking the rightmost seam allowance and will carefully trim away the excess from just one half of it so that it can be folded over and top stitched. At the machine, just open out the skirt and fold over the seam allowance so the trimmed side is covered. Then sew just a few millimeters from the first line of stitching as straight as you can. This will help the skirt lay nicely and drape more evenly. Repeat for the remaining seams, ensuring that they all fold over in the same direction. Next, with the right side facing up, on the left side, fold under the tab that sticks out, along the short line indicated on the pattern. Pin and top stitch close to the edge. Here that's done, and now for the other side. We'll fold the top section along the longer line indicated on the pattern. This will prepare the waistline for being inserted into the waistband. Pin it for now and take the waistband and a seam ripper. Then carefully unpick the longer lower edge. Here we can see the seam allowance stays put because it was well ironed, and we can open out the waistband to insert the skirt. With an overlap of roughly 5 millimeters, pinning the layers together as you go, insert the skirt to the waistband. Here it's done, and double check the other side is all pinned as well. I still have an opening here which you won't have if you follow the pattern, but now we'll top stitch all round the edge of the waistband, just a few millimeters in from the edge, catching all the layers together. Here that's done, and with right sides facing in, bring together the two opening sides. Align the raw edges and pin all the way up. With a 5 millimeter seam allowance, following the long line indicated on the pattern, sew together up to the short mark across the line, opening out the flap that was pinned earlier. Here you see where the seam stops and that we haven't caught the flap in it. Unpin and turn the skirt right side out, and you should now see that you have a nice overlapping opening like this. I'm going to trim one side of the seam allowance and top stitch it flat as we did before. If you've done yours in the same direction as mine, then this back seam will go in the same direction as the others. And it will allow your overlap to sit nice and flat. Here you see I did a little side to side stitch to reinforce the opening too. Now you can add a fastening of your choice, snaps, hook and bar, velcro, etc. We can also tackle the hem. As you can see, it's made up of lots of straight sections, so it could be simply rolled inward and top stitched if you like. Here I've added a snap fastening, and I'm also going to add velcro. The rough side faces out away from the doll. This allows me to model the skirt on the doll at last and think about the hem a little more. For my shorter skirt, I added this lace in short sections all around the hem. But for this one, I'm going to try adding a ruffled fabric edging. Here I have some lovely yellow muslin, which I'm going to cut into a long strip. Fold it, sew a long straight stitch to gather it with, then attach to the hem. I've cut the strip about 5 centimeters or 2 inches wide, and I haven't measured the length. It's roughly 1.5 to 2 times the length of the hem. Now I'll go add this trim. I've lined up my ruffles with the skirt, right sides facing, and I'm now overlocking the seam so that the muslin doesn't fray too much. Back at the sewing machine, I've turned the seam allowance up on the inside and I'm top stitching it neatly. Again, this part will depend on your preference for your hem. There are lots of laces and trims that could finish off your skirt nicely. Here the main assembly is complete. I'm really happy with how it moves and drapes. This fabric is lovely and light, and I adore the irregular hemline. Next, I want to add a fade to the skirt using household bleach. Adults only for this part. First, I dampen the skirt and submerge half in diluted bleach until it fades a little. Then I rinse it all and resubmerge only the bottom of the skirt, so it gets bleached some more. Then I'll wash it and hang it up to dry. Here's my skirt sitting in diluted bleach. No measurements for this bit, just enough water to dip it in, depending on the size of your container. I was hoping the yellow muslin would fade more than it did, but I still really like how it came out. You could instead try dip dyeing your skirt for a different look. I'm really glad I learned how to do this quilter's knot for my thread. It's so quick and easy. Anyway, now I'm going to sew up some yo-yos to embellish my skirt with. This can be a nice way to use your trim fabric elsewhere on your skirt to tie it all together visually. I cut a circle twice the size of the finished yo-yo and do a running stitch round the edge. I pull the thread to gather in the edges and they naturally come together into the middle. I make a knot to secure it and pass the thread out of the back to use later on to sew it to the skirt. I've made more in different fabrics and looked out some buttons, lace and chain that I've added a skull bead and a bell to. Now I can play around with the positioning of these elements before I stitch them into place. If you fancy sewing these skirts yourself, you'll find the sewing pattern available as a downloadable PDF in A4 and US letter sizes. The link is in the description to my website shop. If you're new here, check it out for free patterns and sometimes ready-to-wear doll shoes and clothing. I do hope you've had fun if you've come back to sew this pattern. The assembly of the shorter version is identical, with just one more skirt panel added. I thought I would take Akiko out for a walk to show off her new skirt. I hope you'll share your finished creations with me. I can't wait to see how you make this pattern your own. Please let me know what you think of it in the comments. Perhaps share the video with a friend. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!